Talking Business, a podcast produced in Melbourne, Australia. The podcast is available on the Acast site, my own website, the Apple Podcast Store, or wherever you go to get your podcasts. Or you can get it at the Business Acumen website at www.businessacumen.biz for the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world. Subscribe to Talking Business from our website, leongettler.com. I am Leon Gettler. My job is to review and monitor the week's news in business, finance and economics. I bring it all to you every week. This is episode number 15 in our series for 2025, and today's date is Friday, May the 23rd. First, I'll be talking to Iain Salteri, who developed the KttiPay app, which targets Gen Z and millennials, acknowledging their daily encounters with group spending. The app, loaded with customizable features, simplifies the process by allowing users to create separate kitties for different purposes. KttiPay issues Visa debit cards directly linked to each kitty, facilitating seamless payments and expense tracking, whether for a casual dinner, a weekend getaway or a celebration. KttiPay enables group members to contribute directly to the app using digital wallets like Apple Pay or Google Pay. A digital Visa debit card for the specific kitty is then issued for group-related expenses. And I'll be talking to independent economist Nicholas Green about his innovative idea to set up a citizen council to resolve the US-Canada tariff war, which could potentially be extended to Australia. But first, let's talk to Iain Salteri.
Iain, tell us about KttiPay.
Yeah, so KttiPay is a company that I started and founded coming up on 2 years ago now. And what we're really trying to do is solve the problem of expense splitting for younger people, 18 to 30-year-olds. It was born out of a frustration that I'd experienced myself for products in the market and social situations that I found myself in my late teens, early and mid-20s, whereby I may be going out for dinner or away for a weekend with a bunch of friends. And at the end of the trip, there was always something that was owed to either myself or to whoever organized the trip. And I felt there was a real big pain point for me and my friends and thought, well, maybe we can go and do something about this. So the idea of KttiPay was born.
Normally, people like me use simple arithmetic to work that out. Oh, that's my generation anyway.
Yeah, and that's completely fair, and I think a lot of people do. What the problem I identified, however, was not the arithmetic part of it. It was that people were often out of pocket for expenses that weren't necessarily theirs. So if we went away for a weekend, you and myself, I might book the accommodation using my own personal debit or credit card, and then would ask you to pay me back. And for no fault of your own, you may have forgotten, it may have just been a busy week. You may not have then sent me your portion of the accommodation for some time. And as a 18 or 20-year-old where income is an issue, that was an experience that wasn't particularly fair.
Right. Okay. Now I understand. Now I think everyone understands that.
Yeah.
So what's been the take-up of it?
We've been really happy with the take-up. We're coming up on 5,000 downloads, which is a great result. We're putting a fair bit of money through the platform each day, but we're on our journey. We're aiming for 30,000 downloads in our first year, and we're well on our way there. We're purely domestic in Australia at the moment, but obviously have ambitions to take this overseas and help solve this problem for young people globally.
Because young people globally would have this problem anyway.
Absolutely. I mean, top of mind comes to young people in the UK or Europe and might be traveling around. We know how accessible that is for that generation for someone in London to go to Italy or France for the weekend with their friends. This KttiPay is the perfect tool to help them manage that expense splitting.
For that matter, kids in the US could travel, kids from New York could travel jointly to Chicago.
Absolutely. I mean, you just got to look at the diversity of trips and experiences that you can do in the US. But the other side of this is it's not just about trips and holidaying, right? It can be about household expenses. So, I've had the experience whereby with an ex-partner of mine, we tried to start a joint bank account, and when we broke up, trying to unravel that joint bank account was particularly difficult. You had to go and improve yourself in a bank branch. With KttiPay, you can do that online on your mobile app within a couple of minutes, and you can set one up just as quick.
So it works as an app?
Yeah, so we are on both the iOS and Android app stores.
And how did you develop the technology for it?
Yeah, so we originally went and got an external development team to develop it for us. So that was through a connection of mine based out of Dublin is the company which developed it. But we've recently just brought that engineering team in-house. So we now have 4 developers in-house and plan to recruit 3 or 4 more in the coming months.
So what's the reason for that? You want to develop it further?
We've got a large product roadmap which we want to bring to life, but beyond that, there's quite a big business opportunity here for us to reduce our costs through gaining access to the R&D tax grant, which is a great program in Australia. So if companies like us are looking to bring this development in-house, then the program is doing its job.
I have to ask, how do you make money out of it?
It's a great question. I don't have a full answer for you today. We went out to market with the strategy of offering this product for free for the first year or so. So we're still in that process. I think a lot of what we're delivering is a completely new experience to people, and we didn't want cost to be a barrier to entry for them. So people can download the app, put money in and spend money for free. And in fact, we actually offer products which are significantly cheaper than other competitors in the market. So our KttiPay Visa debit card, when you spend overseas, we charge currently 0% on international transaction fees. So instead of going and getting a Qantas travel card, which may be 3 or 4%, you can download the KttiPay app, download a KttiPay Visa debit card, and spend in whatever currency you like with 0% exchange fees.
So basically, you'll be spending time to work out what your business model would be for this.
Yeah, I mean, we've got some really clear ideas in mind, and I won't preempt it today. We've got working hypotheses on how we'd monetize it, and we'll start to bring that online.
Now, I have to ask, are there any competitors?
There's no direct competitor as such. So there are companies out there such as Splitwise that look to help people in calculating how much they are owed or how much they owe to people, but none of them really facilitate the transfer of the money, which is where the issue is in my mind. And that's the problem we're trying to solve is trying to make sure that no one's left out of pocket and that the funds are there up front to be able to pay for your expenses. So I guess in a way, it's kind of the complete opposite to an afterpay model whereby you get the product today and you pay it off in the future. We like to think that we're a little bit maybe more financially conscious than some of those products. So being able to pay upfront and split the bill evenly, we think is a huge selling point.
But that hasn't been done at all by any of your competitors.
No.
Anywhere in the world. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. There are companies that do little parts of it. A joint bank account operates in a very similar way, but we're looking to take that to the next level, being able to split individual line items unevenly between people. So, if you and I, Leon, went out to a really nice dinner and you got a lobster mornay and I got a side salad and the bill was $100, then I wouldn't want to be paying $50 for that. I might only want to pay 20 and you 80. And so KttiPay is building the technology that will allow that to be split unevenly, as opposed to your normal joint bank account, which doesn't allow that.
I have to ask, are you looking at getting in any partners, such as banks or anything like that?
Yeah, we are speaking to a few partners at the moment, not necessarily banks per se, but where it makes sense to partner with a other financial product. So we're looking at how we can introduce rewards into the platform as quickly as possible and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So how soon do you expect to get that up and running?
It's the age-old question of prioritization with limited resource, right? We would hope we'd have that up and running in the next 2 to 3 months. So we've already got an agreement in principle with a couple of partners to execute on that, but it just needs to find our way onto our roadmap and get coded in, basically.
But it's just a matter of time.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Just around the corner.
Right.
It depends. If you're a small, nimble fintech product like us, 2 months feels like a lifetime to deliver a really innovative product. If you're a big four bank, maybe 2 months is too quick. So.
Right. Okay. But at the same time, you would have to offer your partners some take of the business.
No, so we can look at other commercial models. So there could be a revenue share opportunity there. We're not looking to acquire any businesses or anything like that at the moment. So if there's an opportunity to complement our product by partnering with an adjacent product, then we'll look at those opportunities.
What I'm saying, though, is that the adjacent product would need to have some share of the revenue coming in,
Yes, correct.
but you still have to work all of that out.
So if I give you an example of where we're looking to partner with a cashback rewards program, whereby if you spend with your KttiPay card, you might get 3% of your total purchase back into your KttiPay wallet as a cashback reward. So in that instance, that's a new revenue line actually for us. So we wouldn't have that as an opportunity to monetize that, because on top of the user getting 3% back, we might get back 1 or 2% with our partnership with this cashback rewards program. So it actually becomes not a revenue share per se, but a new revenue line for us.
And by that token, a revenue line for your partner as well.
Correct. So it's mutually beneficial.
Right. Okay. Well, Iain will be watching it with fascination.
Thanks so much, Leon. I appreciate it.
Now let's talk to independent economist Nicholas Green.
Well, Nicholas, you proposed setting up a US-Canada People's Council in response to the geopolitical issues of tariffs to represent the citizenry of each country and deliberate and advise its views on the US-Canada relations. And its members from each country would be chosen by lottery. I assume the same would apply for Australia. How would these work?
So I guess I thought about this when Trump was about his announcement of declaring a trade war on the world, an extraordinary thing for us all to witness. And one thing jumped out at me, which is that I guess I want to talk about, I think the strongest case for this is between America and Canada, because people were kind of in disbelief. And so I always think that the things we're going through are partly an artifact of the system of electoral democracy, which over 100 years of professional optimization has come to the crazy freak show that we are now all used to. And so the alternative is to represent the people in a different way, which is to the way we do in juries. You just grab some of them on a random basis, or rather a basis that it gives you end up with the right number of people of different ages, and women and men and people from the country and people from the city and so on. And we've mostly thought of these bodies as domestic bodies, juries in courts, but also citizen juries on political matters. And it struck me that you could do something similar about international relations. And so I think it would be really quite, it would take you somewhere new and benign, new and constructive, to get 50 randomly selected Americans and 50 randomly selected Canadians and say, what do you think of this? What we know from opinion polls is obviously virtually every Canadian is against what Donald Trump is doing, and 60% of Americans are against it. I think it would, the number of Americans against it would soar when they're in a meeting with with their own kind and with Canadians, and Canadians will say, we fought alongside you, we did this less than 2 decades ago. What the hell is going on? So that's the idea, and I think it could kind of calm down things and allow an environment in which people can express their respect for each other and their decency. And you can't do that in the current political system. All you've got is political rhetoric.
The US is unlikely to agree on any of this. So how would any of this be funded?
So there are 2 ways of funding it. Firstly, I think it would be quite an entrepreneurial thing for the Canadian government to do. It could simply fund it and then hand the governance of the process over to someone who wasn't the Canadian government, because you obviously need it to be governed in a way which isn't partisan between countries. The alternative is that a philanthropy could do it. The Lowy Institute could do it. It happens to be based in Australia, so it's not. But something like the Lowy Institute, just some stray billionaire who wants to spend a few pennies doing something useful. These are things that can be done quite easily. They're not super cheap, but I mean, for governments, they cost nothing. And for somebody with some serious philanthropic money, you could do all this for $1 million for 6 months or something like that.
It could be crowdfunding.
It could be, I think you need to show people what it is before you crowdfund it. So I think with all of these sorts of things that I've been talking about, privately funded citizens' assemblies, you need to show them to people. And then I think once you show them to people, you may well be able to get them crowdfunded.
Right. So clearly there are benefits of having this.
I think our political system is pretty uninhabitable. We've just been through an election in this country, Leon, as we all know, and it got down to slogans like he cuts, you pay. Now, I don't, and then on the other side, it was something equally kind of reductive and silly. And so what we don't have in our political system is a process which actively carves out the time, creates the circumstance in which people can talk to each other, discuss things, agree, disagree, and so on. This is just a massive hole in our democracy, and it has its own benefits if you did it unilaterally within a country, and I think it allows. The other thing is that when people get caught up in this, when they see it, but particularly if they're one of the participants, it can change their life. And we're already used to lots of soft power augmentation of our relationships. So there's kind of sister city relationships and sporting missions and sporting competitions and so on. Imagine if, as part of the ordinary apparatus of relations with another country, we didn't just have an embassy and all of those things, which we obviously need, but we had something like this with Australia and Indonesia, Australia and Thailand, all these places, and we ran a citizen council between ordinary citizens of the two countries, in which the personnel was rotated and people got some travel and they got to know each other. Seems to me that's just a profoundly convivial and world building thing to do. And it could turn out to be a very valuable thing to do when we are prosecuting our international relations around the world.
And it also builds international relations.
Exactly. And I don't want to, I mean, one of the things that people, when they hear this, especially international relations people, they get a little scared that I'm really quite naive. And I think I think that nations can be buddies. And I don't really think that. I think that realpolitik will continue, but we may be able to soften it somewhat, and we can introduce the possibility of human bonds as a small part of this process. We shouldn't be naive about it. There is no international policeman like there is in our relations with each other domestically. So I don't want to be naive about it, but I think it could profoundly enrich our lives. It could improve international relations, and it could improve the sanity with which our political system thinks about itself, thinks about other countries, and thinks about its own interests in the context of international relations.
But you'd have to have politicians agreeing to this as well.
You absolutely would not. You can do it unilaterally. If you and I, Leon, I don't know about you, but if we both had more money than I suspect we do, we could do it. And I think it would be a really good thing for, say, the Lowy Institute to do. But yes, it would be good. And I think certainly if it's in the background and it's not necessarily in the context of a very fraught international incident or tension, then governments could support this. So I don't want to suggest they couldn't. I think they could. But anyone can do this. And my experience of rather more years than I'd like to say is that if you have to persuade governments to do things, plan to invest another decade or two into it before you're even close. Whereas if you can do it and simply show people what you're talking about, that is a way to get things happening, and you can do it quite fast. you've still got to persuade somebody to come up with some of the money.
So potentially you could see Australia developing this with the US as well.
You could do, indeed, you could do it with, and I suspect if we did this with all, with the 50 or 35 most important trading partners, I think at least until Donald Trump arrived, the one, if you got picked for the US one, you'd think you'd won the lottery. It'd be great fun. But imagine people would think of it as such a thrill, even if they're going to another country and it's got another language and all that sort of stuff. It would be a very exciting thing. You could also do it between schools and so on.
And particularly Australia could develop it with China.
I think that would be terrific. And we could develop it at the national level. We could develop it at the provincial level. So a state in Australia could could establish some of these sorts of ties with a particular part of China.
Indeed. Well, that'll be fascinating to watch if it does happen indeed.
Well, okay. Maybe someone out there listening is going to write me a check.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Nicholas. Thank you.
Thanks.
So what's happening in the news? Well, the US has lost its last perfect credit rating. Why? Because influential ratings firm Moody's expressed concern over the government's ability to pay back its debt. In lowering the US rating from AAA to AA1, Moody's noted that successive US administrations had failed to reverse ballooning deficits and interest costs. A AAA rating signifies a country's highest possible credit reliability and indicates it is considered to be in very good financial health, with a strong capacity to repay its debts. Moody's warned in 2023 the US AAA rating was at risk. Fitch Ratings downgraded the US in 2023, and S&P Global Ratings did so in 2011. Moody's, on the other hand, has held a perfect credit rating for the US since 1917. The downgrade reflects the increase over more than a decade in government debt and interest payment ratios to levels that are significantly higher than similarly rated sovereigns, Moody's said in a statement. In a statement, the White House said it was focused on fixing Biden's mess while taking a swipe at Moody's. If Moody's had any credibility, White House spokesman Kush Desai said, they would not have stayed silent as the fiscal disaster of the past 4 years unfolded. A lower credit rating means countries are more likely to default on their sovereign debt and generally face higher borrowing costs. Still, Moody's maintained that US retains exceptional credit strengths such as size, resilience and dynamism, and the continued role of the US dollar as a global reserve currency. But the firm said it expects federal debt to increase to around 134% of gross domestic product, or GDP, by 2035, up from 98% last year. GDP is a measure of all the economic activity of companies, governments and people in a country. The downgrade came on the same day as Trump's landmark spending bill suffered a setback in Congress. Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill failed to pass the House Budget Committee, with some Republicans voting against it. Figures showed the US economy shrank in the first 3 months of the year as government spending fell and imports surged due to firms racing to get goods into the country ahead of tariffs. The US Commerce Department said the economy contracted at an annual rate of 0.3%, a sharp downturn after growth of 2.4% in the previous quarter. And Anthony Scaramucci, the Wall Street investor who runs alternative asset manager Skybridge Capital and manages the New York Stock Exchange listed cryptocurrency ETF, and who famously served for 11 days as White House press secretary in Donald Trump's first administration, says the US has no choice but to reduce tariffs on China to below 10% and is likely to face further credit ratings downgrade as a budget crisis rolls on. Scaramucci said that while China ultimately needed an end to the trade embargo with the US, it was Trump who backed down last week when the US announced it would reduce tariffs on Chinese imports from 145% to 30%. He predicted the Trump administration would end up settling for much lower tariffs. He's now down to 30%, and that's going below 10%. It has to, because 30% is a recession here, Scaramucci said. There'll be a massive capitulation over the next 60 to 90 days. They'll call it taco over here. Trump always chickens out. The removal of America's last AAA credit rating by Moody's on Friday night was more evidence of how little the market believes in the plan, he said. I'm surprised the downgrade didn't happen 5 years ago, and the next 5 years there'll be further downgrades, Scaramucci said. And 5 years after Brexit, the UK and EU have struck a deal that covers fishing, trade, defence, energy and strengthening ties in a number of policy areas still up for negotiation. A key part of the deal involves giving European fishing boats a further 12 years of access to British waters in exchange for easing some trade frictions. It marks the biggest reboot since the UK officially left the EU in 2020 and comes after years of disagreements over Brexit. The Conservatives and Reform UK have described the deal as a surrender to the EU, while the Liberal Democrats said the government had taken some positive first steps to rebuilding ties with Europe. The agreement was finalised late on Sunday ahead of the summit involving EU chiefs Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa in London on Monday. It's time to look forward, British PM Sir Keir Starmer said at the summit. At a news conference, European Commission President von der Leyen described the summit as a historic moment that was only possible thanks to the leadership of Sir Keir. We're turning a page, she said. We're opening a new chapter in our relationship. The President said the deal would make a real difference to people in the UK and across our union at a time of global instability. And the Reserve Bank of Australia has cut interest rates, taking the cash rate below 4% for the first time in 2 years. The RBA's official cash rate was last below 4% in May 2023 before it was raised to 4.1% at the June 2023 meeting. At its May meeting, the RBA's Monetary Policy Board decided to decrease the cash rate by 0.25 of a percentage point to 3.85%. It is the second cut to rates this year, providing some further relief to home loan borrowers after 13 rate hikes between May 2022 and November 2023, when the cash rate was left on hold until a cut in February this year. Forecast in the RBA's latest quarterly statement on monetary policy, or SMP, offers good news for borrowers by suggesting that market prices for a 3.2% cash rate by early next year is compatible with inflation staying near the middle of its 2 to 3% target range. After the February board meeting, US President Donald Trump's Liberation Day tariff announcement ignited global trade disputes and rocked financial markets, leading some to forecast even deeper rate cuts, even though the ensuing tariff delays saw expectations pared back. In its post-statement meeting, the board acknowledged that inflation has fallen substantially from its peak, while the outlook remains uncertain, also lowers its forecast for economic growth and inflation. It was forced to admit that household spending would remain softer than expected, both due to domestic factors and the uncertainty caused by Trump. At a press conference following the decision, RBA Governor Michelle Bullock said the possibility of holding rates steady was quickly cast aside for a debate on how deeply to cut. If you add the international uncertainty, that gives you a little bit of confidence that the risks have actually balanced up a bit, she said. The Nationals frontbenchers will have their pay cut by almost $60,000 as part of the price for going it alone after the Junior Party refused to renew the coalition agreement with the Liberals. The split means no Nationals will be included in the official opposition 30-member frontbench. Nationals frontbenchers will also have to shed advisers whom they would otherwise have been entitled to under the opposition staffing allowance. The Nationals will appoint their own portfolio spokespeople to speak on issues and develop policies. These will include major portfolios such as Treasury, Finance and Foreign Affairs, which have traditionally been held by Liberals in government and opposition. National Senate leader Bridget McKenzie indicated the newly liberated members could join with other minor parties, including the Greens, on issues that mattered to regional communities. Liberal leader Suzanne Lee said the Liberals would appoint a new shadow ministry drawn exclusively from the Liberal Party room in coming days, and gave no guarantees that Nationals will be welcomed back onto the front bench inside of the next election. Under Remuneration Tribunal guidelines, shadow ministers are entitled to an extra 20 to 25% loading on top of a parliamentary base salary of $233,660. The 25% loading is worth $58,415 for someone serving in the shadow cabinet. Those in the outer shadow ministry receive the 20% loading, worth $46,732. And the Albanese government said it won't allow Donald Trump's war on wokeness to undermine its diversity and inclusion agenda, including at the agency charged with securing at least 3 Virginia-class submarines from the US. Finance and Public Service Minister Katie Gallagher has backed the Australian Submarine Agency's diversity policies amid concern the Trump administration would take issue with its mandating of diversity champions and training and regular diversity and inclusion activities. The US President banished radical and wasteful diversity and inclusion programs through US government agencies and their major contractors in his first days back in office. With his controversial Defence Secretary Peter Hegseth expected to visit Australia for AUSMIN talks in coming months, some analysts believe the administration's anti-DEI crusade could become a further point of bilateral tension on top of differences over tariffs and the behaviour of big tech companies. The concerns emerged as Australian universities reeled at the loss of US grants after refusing to align with Mr Trump's political agenda, including his anti-transgender executive order recognising only 2 sexes. US defence giants with Australian subsidiaries including Lockheed Martin, Raytheon and Boeing Boeing have already axed their DEI policies at home and are waiting to see if they'll be required to do so in their international operations, which could place them in conflict with Australian government policies. The ASA's diversity and inclusion policies requires the appointment of senior leaders as diversity champions focused on the culturally and linguistically CALD, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex and asexual, LGBTQIA+, neurodiversity, First Nations, disability and mental health, and women and gender. It commits the agency to a range of diversity and inclusion activities, including a trans and gender diversity introduction webinar, Are You OK?, day morning teas, and virtual and in-person events for International Women's Day. The ASA is a member of the Diversity Council of Australia and the Pride in Diversity Employer Support Group, and uses their tools and services to guide best practice initiatives, the policy said. The Defence Department's diversity policy is even more prescriptive, requiring enterprise-wide culture statements, setting clear expectations of behaviour, and the completion of a range of online courses on subjects such as conscious bias and cultural awareness. Senator Gallagher, who is also Minister for Women, said Labor's election Women over Peter Dutton's coalition, which took some inspiration from Mr Trump and his policies, underscored the community's support for ensuring a diverse and inclusive public service. The Australian Public Service operates best when it reflects the community it exists to serve, she said. The Australian people voted this election to comprehensively reject a coalition platform that was built on the politics of division and imported policies from overseas. Labor will continue to govern in the interests of all Australians. The ASA, which is forecast to expand its workforce to more than 880 this year, is leading Australia's negotiations with the US government to purchase 3 to 5 Virginia-class submarines under the $368 billion AUKUS plan. And Qantas is asking for leniency from the federal court in hearings to determine a penalty for its unlawful outsourcing of 1,820 workers, claiming the decision was a mistake rather than deliberate. On the other side of the fence, the Transport Workers Union, which brought the case against Qantas, wants Justice Michael Lee to impose a maximum penalty of $121 million against the airline, highlighting its reluctance to accept the ruling and lack of remorse. Barrister for the TWU, Noel Hutley, to SC, said even the witness used by Qantas, Chief People Officer Catherine Walsh, demonstrated the company's culture to remain unchanged. Ms Walsh was only appointed to Qantas in early 2024, and Mr Hutley said putting her on the stand had the look of choosing a person who could not be the subject of true investigation. Ms Walsh had nothing to do with the events of the outsourcing, and Your Honour will have noticed every time I cross-examined her about a particular event, she said, "Well, I wasn't there, I can't speak to that," said Mr Hutley. Justice Lee agreed that Ms Walsh was not the best choice of witness for Qantas in the circumstances, and noted he'd given the airline ample opportunity to call Chief Executive Vanessa Hudson, who was Chief Financial Officer at the time of the outsourcing. One would have thought if you were truly contrite, put someone in the witness box who was there at the relevant time, who said, "I was part of the organisation when this decision was made, and now I changed my tune," said Justice Lee. "And I gave them every opportunity to call CEO Ms Hudson or somebody else in that situation, and a deliberate forensics decision was made for her not to be called, I would infer." Barrister for Qantas Justin Gleeson, SC, told the court the airline was seeking a mid-range penalty of no less than $40 million and no more than $80 million. He said the court can and should impose a significant deterrent penalty, but pointed out it was a contravention and no further contraventions had occurred since then. His submission focused heavily on legal advice prepared in advance of the outsourcing decision, which showed there was no attempt to conceal an illicit reason. And that's it for this week. And next week I'll be talking to Nexia's Head of Financial Planning, Craig Wilford, about how in the next 20 years $40 trillion will be transferred from baby boomers to their children and grandchildren as inheritance, and how Australians who are now reliant on their compulsory super savings need to ensure they can extend their savings for the duration of their retirement. And I'll be talking to independent economist Saul Eslake about the Albanese economic agenda in this term and what policies it should be taking to the 2028 election. For the most exclusive access to leading economists and business leaders from around the world, subscribe to Talking Business from our website, leongettler.com. If you like Talking Business, please leave us a review with Apple Podcasts. Thank you in advance. In the meantime, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, or X as it's now known, Instagram, LinkedIn and YouTube. If you want to contact me, email me at leon@leongettler.com. I answer all emails. Also, in my spare time, I have a copywriting business. If anyone needs newsletters, blogs, articles or advertorial, email me. Looking forward to the next episode of Talking Business.